Everybody. Scott Sternberg and Dave Lacerte here. Sternberg, Naccari, and White here in New Orleans. We have Keith Naccari, who is isolating in place over on the North Shore. Happy to be here for the return of our Wednesday web chat series. Hope everybody's doing well with the reopening. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the PPP, and then we're going to talk a little bit about reopening and the protocols and some of the things we're seeing from our clients. Keith, you want to start us off with a PPP update?
Sure. So as we're getting into week 8 for some clients who receive their money early on, or especially in the first round, the big question now is the application for forgiveness. The application has been issued, and we've discussed that at length in the past. There was also some more guidance issued, though, on the 22nd. Concerning the forgiveness and how to calculate things such as full-time equivalents. For a while, it was anticipated that a full-time equivalent would be 30 hours. It's now 40. We are also looking at a simplified way to calculate full-time employees. Basically, anything under 40 hours is a half of an employee. Anything over 40 hours is a full employee. These calculations can get pretty complex, but they're very important. And for those who are not right at the end of their 8-week period, it's important to be looking at those calculations now while you can still do something about it, because those reductions are going to be fairly drastic. As always, the PPP loans are still subject to change in the rules governing the forgiveness. We do anticipate some changes to come. You know, was it a week and a half ago, there was potential legislation to expand the period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. I don't know that that's gone, but we're still on an 8-week period. It does make it difficult for businesses to plan spending the money, and the best advice we can give is spend the money on what's necessary to operate your business, keeping in mind those reduction calculations. That way, if we do get an expansion and you'd be better off spending that money over a greater period of time, there's still some left.
Great. And Keith, you're keeping abreast of all the legislative changes that we might see as people hit their 8 weeks. It's going to be really important to pay attention to what Congress is doing and what the IRS is putting out there, right?
Sure, and we monitor that multiple times a day, and are updating our clients as necessary.
Great. So if anybody has questions about that, our live chat's available 24/7 on our website. You can also email Keith at SNW.LAW. Let's go ahead and get into the reopening problems that we're seeing. Dave, we're so glad to have you in person again. It's so nice to be in the room with somebody again.
Yeah, I feel like I was Wilson living on an island somewhere. It was good to be back in the office.
In this, I'm Tom Hanks, so I'm okay with that. We're seeing a lot of challenges to reopening around the state. We're sitting in New Orleans where, we're still in phase 1 and the rest of the state is going into phase 2. What kind of questions are you seeing from your clients right now about this reopening plan?
The biggest question that we're kind of being asked right now is how afraid should I be of being sued if one of my employees or a customer or a client comes down with the coronavirus, right? So the question is very complex. There's some bills that have been passed through the legislature, which are pending the governor's approval, which limit and narrow liability for business owners, shopkeepers, employers, if an employee gets sick or a customer gets sick.
Right.
The best thing that we can do is maintain the societal standard of care. And you'll see that about town. You see people wearing masks. You'll see people maintaining social distancing. You see people sanitizing workspaces. You really should have a plan in place that you can refer to where if someone ever does get sick and you do ever eventually get sued on this, you can say, here are our standard operating procedures that we put in place. Some of the bills kind of modify that a little bit. They apply a gross negligence standard. So what that means is, okay, if Scott, you knew that I was sick and we had a really important brief due and we still had to go into the office and bang it out and make sure our clients are well represented, and we knew that you were sick, but we didn't take those precautions. That's a different heightened standard for gross negligence or willful conduct, right? You said you made your paralegal come in and help you with this when you knew you could give them the coronavirus. That is a different story. And it's also an issue of workers' comp versus a suit in district court for negligence or a tort action. So those are issues as well.
And I guess, part of the issue is causation, right? Like part of every tort claim is you have to prove that, the person's action was the actual cause of your, damage. So if I go to Sam's or Costco and, how do I know that I didn't pick up Sam's or Costco, coronavirus at Sam's or Costco?
It's almost impossible to prove, but also when you're talking about litigation, sometimes it's not what's possible or impossible. It's how the question is framed and presented to the finder of fact. So to nip it in the bud and to minimize your risk, you definitely have to come up with a game plan, come up with a procedure, written protocol, and go over that with your own lawyer. Make sure you're appropriately applying the standard of care in the industry in which you kind of operate in.
Right.
And that might differ and change depending upon what you do.
So like here at the
Dave,
office, sorry, go
it's
ahead.
probably important to point out too, though, these standard operating procedures shouldn't be so aspirational that you can't do them on a regular basis. One of the worst things a company can do is create a great policy that they can't follow. You're really setting yourself up for somebody coming back and saying, yes, this policy looks great. I'm glad you had it in place. You failed to follow it. You knew this would happen because you put it in place. It was there to protect us and you failed to do so.
Right. And that's something we've done here at this office. Keith, you haven't been down here in a while, but we are keeping track of everybody that walks in the door so that we can make sure if one of those people comes down with coronavirus, we can notify everybody who was here. I went to the doctor yesterday and the doctor took my temperature and turned around and said, if anyone gets coronavirus from this office in the next 14 days, we're going to contact you so that you can quarantine. I mean, across professions, people are implementing safeguards, not just because it's a good legal strategy, but also because it's good customer relations, right? I mean, that's a lot of this is customer relations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The golden rule applies, do what's right for your customers. But also, like Keith said, you have to come up with a policy and a procedure, and you have to, implement the policy and procedure. It's like that old Jerry Seinfeld's stand-up routine where he says, you know how to take the reservation, but you don't know how to hold the reservation. So it's a two-part system here. You need to do both.
That's right. That's right. Dave, I wanted to ask you about kind of veering off this coronavirus deal or tort as it relates to coronavirus. We've seen a lot about tort reform in the news lately. Does that tort reform bill affect the coronavirus response in any way?
The tort reform bill itself doesn't necessarily affect it on point. There are 2 or 3 instruments that have passed the legislature, which are expected to be signed by the governor into law, which do. Now, how those are implemented, it's going to be the devil in the details type thing, one of which are more geared toward essential activities, first responder things, and how broad that actually gets defined in practicality is going to be up in the air. There's restaurants and takeout orders as it relates to the coronavirus, and it is retroactive to March, but it only deals with the coronavirus itself. It's no prospective in nature. It only deals with this one emergency declaration. So there's a lot of details to be fleshed out. While the tort reform bill doesn't directly deal with those issues on point, these other instruments do, but it's very much up in the air right now.
Keith, any other updates for the audience?
None on my end.
Okay, great. Well, it's been an eventful couple of weeks. Obviously, we hope everybody's safe. And we're really glad to see that business is starting to pick up again in the state of Louisiana as we move toward recovery. Dave, anything else for the folks at home?
That's it. We're starting to open up here at the offices in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. We hope to see your bright smiling faces again here soon. Of course, as we do that, we're going to gently ease into things just as you all are. But it's good to kind of get back with a little semblance of normalcy around here.
Right. So everybody stay tuned to SNW.LAW for all the updates. You can find us online on our Facebook page, which you're probably already there, at facebook.com/SNW Law Firm. And please stay tuned to our website, and we'll see you next week. Stay safe, wash your hands.
Thanks, guys.